Good morning and good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our What is Impactful Leadership in a Virtual World webinar. We have a global audience today, along with global panelists. The audience is spanning over 35 countries and over 40 different industries. So welcome, everyone, and thanks so much for attending. Thank you to everyone who has already submitted questions. We have incorporated them into our discussion today, and we will try and make some time at the end of the session to answer any further questions as well. You will see a Q&A section on the webinar screen. If you do have any questions throughout the session, please feel free to submit them. And again, we'll answer them at the end of the session. If we don't get to answer some questions, then we will, feel free to contact us directly, and we will be looking to incorporate them in future blogs as well. So keep an eye out for other communications coming from us. I'd like to firstly introduce our panelists today, and a special thank you again for joining us. We have panelists from around the world, as you know. Karina Matheson has joined us from South Africa. She is the manager of Excelate with over 30 years experience in learning and development. Karina is passionate about equipping and supporting leaders on their leadership journey and help all employees make the mind shifts needed to be successful within the current environment and adapting to all external changes. We are also joined by Dr. Jarmo Kotterlane, an economist and strategist based in the Middle East, with an interdisciplinary perspective, who's devoted most of his career to understanding and enabling economic development in emerging economies. So today we're going to be drawing on his in-depth knowledge, and Dr. Jarmo will be sharing insights from his latest work, Trials of Resilience, how COVID-19 is driving economic change in the Arab Gulf. We are also joined by Rekha, General Manager, Customer Experience and People Development at Dialogue Exatia PLC in Sri Lanka. With over 20 years experience in customer experience and HR. She is responsible for customer experience and service culture transformation. She has pioneered new ways to improve performance and mental health during virtual working at Dialogue and brings some great examples to share. We are also joined by Anand Sudarshan, Independent Director on the board of NIIT and founder and director of Sylvant Advisors in India, an experienced founder, executive and board member with a recognised history of working in technology and education histories with a passion for people development. Anand brings insights and experience on how businesses can make technology work for them. So, welcome everyone. We are here today to really look at impactful leadership, and ILM's aim is to support businesses to harness leadership and management skills and behaviours in their people to develop careers and drive success. Through our ILM Thought Leadership series, we are aiming to stimulate discussion and enable business leaders to share experiences and best practice on coping through change, building the leaders of the future, and driving business growth in an increasingly virtual world. Okay, so I'll move on and start the conversation now. Over to Anand firstly. So the challenges businesses across the world have faced during the COVID-19 pandemic are well known, but the impact has varied, and this is often down to the way the organisations have dealt with change. You have identified 3 stages of change during this time. Can you tell us a little bit more about those and what organisations who are still struggling can do to help move forward at the next stage?
Sure, Victoria, thank you. Good day, everybody. First up, my thanks to ILM for inviting me to this panel and share my thoughts. And you're right, I think what we have seen in 2020, what we continue to see early part of 2021 is something unprecedented, certainly in our lifetimes. And I fervently hope, and it certainly doesn't happen again for a long, long time to come, if at all. It has had a multitude of vectors of impact. And I think the big impact immediately is this was completely unexpected. The possibility of a pandemic was always appreciated, but the probability of the pandemic was always held to be, will happen much later. And I think that was the difference. Humanity was curious about the possibility, but not prepared for the probability. And therefore, the first impact, which I believe was there in everybody, was shock. And that shock led to people freezing. And I've seen it in all our portfolio companies, all of them, and other education entities that I work with, the companies that I'm on the board of. I think there was the shock translated itself into a period of what I call as period of moping. And when we were going around and then saying, oh, what's happened to us? And depending on the company and depending on the sector, that moping period was either small or large. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples as I go through and I talk about the other phases, and I'll try and integrate them very quickly. This quickly, in most instances, gave way to an acceptance of the new reality, an unfolding reality which was getting more and more intense and more damaging for businesses and relationships, and really was pushing people into an era which they were not used to. Travel, to take one example, was suddenly brought down to zero. Just to give one example, food stuff was not easily available, and so on and so forth. So there was the immediate human instinct that kicked in, which is, this is the reality. How am I going to cope with it? So this is the second phase of coping. Now, if you look at organizations as a whole, I'm on the board of a large school chain, and we were just chatting about it. And that school chain itself, for the first probably 2 weeks, 3 weeks, I would think, just froze. Just didn't know what to do. They have about 150 plus schools, 200,000 students studying with them around the country, and they had absolutely no clue how to respond, none. And we had lots of conversations in between, and really they reached a point where they really did not know what to do. And I then saw the survival mechanism kicking in very quickly, and they started coping by embracing, and they did it in extremely beautifully. Over 1,000 teachers got trained in using video conference, which they have never done before. They had to use video conference, and many of the teachers are from low middle income kind of families, so they did not have private spaces in their homes. They had young children and so on and so forth. What is today in some senses amusing when you see happen is actually very stressful, I'm sure, for the faculty. And they started coping with it. They started getting on using their own devices in many instances, which was not optimized. Fortunately, India has a reasonably strong technology, the telecommunications infrastructure in most places, not all, but in most places, and that kind of helped. 4G is quite prevalent, and that kind of helped. And people very quickly got into it. So I saw this coping happening pretty quickly. So between the pandemic, start of the pandemic, which is in the Indian context, and the lockdown was announced in March, by the time it reached about May mostly, people had started, coping with the new reality. The coping process continued for a period of time, and once they found comfort in coping and started looking around, got some better sense of the impact of the pandemic across the world, better idea of what science, how much science is understanding this virus, and then of course the vaccination part of it, about which we are all familiar with. I think people started, hoping the future is going to change, but more importantly, starting to figure out how the future is going to change. They started scoping out the opportunities, scoping out the various possibilities that they could adopt. And I'm now seeing the scoping process is still not over in most instances, in almost all instances. But I'm now seeing solid strategies come out, One of my investee companies, for example, in about 45 days, their entire business came to a halt. The business was predicated on on-premise availability of students in educational institutions. And since students are not there and still not gone back, their business came to a grinding halt. And they then, in about 45 days' time, reimagined themselves, reinvented themselves, and now in a new avatar, they are now beginning to scope out what their future is going to be look like. So those are the 3 steps that I've seen, across everybody, not just companies that I'm engaged in. In all my conversations with people, I'm seeing this play out in different ways. Of course, this is different. The pace and the cadence of this is different across different sectors. Some sectors still haven't got it quite figured out. F&B sector, for example, still hasn't got it quite figured out because they just don't know what people's responses are going to be. But you can see the beginnings of it happen in almost all of them. I'll stop there.
Yeah, I agree. It's none of us were expecting, what happened over the past year or so. And I think, and obviously we've entered into the new year now. And I think, the moping, coping, scoping, every one of us can actually relate to. And we're all feeling our way and scoping out at the moment. So yeah, I'll just thanks Anand. That's really insightful. I'll move over to Karina. So Anand's description of beginning with the moping stage is really interesting. I know personally I went through it, that feeling of being overwhelmed and, what's happening, what do we do, how do I, continue to perform and manage personal stuff. And the impact on our teams and individual well-being is huge. It's huge, and it's something that we can't ignore. We've got to support people through this, haven't we? In your organisation, what has the impact been on staff well-being, and what measures have you put in place to enhance communication, motivate staff and protect their well-being? You're on mute, Karina.
Sorry.
I'll take you off there. Fine.
Okay, apologies. Thank you very much, Victoria. And again, it's a privilege to be here. I think it's a privilege to talk to all leaders because you are crucial in all of this. So thank you very much for that. Yes, I think aligned to the moping stage, we started off everybody very, the focus was on, get in line, figure out how to set up your environment, getting into technology and all of those kind of things. So, but everybody thought, it's temporary. So let's do this now, but it's going to be temporary. And as we went along and people started obviously losing energy because of all the stuff that's happening, the kids and everything. And people started realizing, but it's not temporary. It's going to be much longer than we thought, which had an impact on their thinking and on how they feel. So especially by the end of the year, you could really, really see the impact on wellness with the people, resilience, emotional intelligence, and all those kind of things. So from a learning and development perspective, I can give you lots of courses to do. I mean, you can go on the internet. There's lots of courses around communication, emotional intelligence, and all those kind of things. But for me, I would like to go back to basics. And I would like to say the most simplest way to check well-being, to get communication engagement going is check in, check in, check in. Even if it's a 30 minutes, check in. Individually, it's very important individually. You want the person to not feel lonely. You want to make that person feel that they are important. And I mean, I have check-ins with my teams where I just talk about no work, not are you okay, do you cope, really about what's happening in your family and all of that. And then they always tell me that was very nice to just talk about that and not about work. And then obviously you have your check-ins with work. So I do think for me we need to get back to basics. We need to do the basic stuff with our people. And then obviously that same engagement you need to initiate between the team members, because they can't drink coffee anymore at the coffee station together. They don't walk past each other in the passage and say, hello, is this okay and that okay? And we actually had a strat session yesterday with my team where we said we need to actually schedule tea breaks with each other. Just to get that connection going, because we were together yesterday and we realized we miss connecting with each other on another level than work. So it is about how do you initiate that? And I mean, there's lots of, I've attended workshops, etc., that gives you lots of ideas. One thing that I'm going to try doing is a once a month lunch, where we just eat lunch and we play a game together. And we already said, what kind of games can you play virtually? We've actually thought of we're going to do a Zumba session together. So for me, it's really, let's get those things going. There's lots of courses and lots of things, but that's important, that getting back to basics. Thank you.
Absolutely, I agree completely, Karina. I agree completely with that, and I'm intrigued about the Zumba session. I think that would be fun. That's inspired me, definitely. Yes, thank you. Rika, we've spoken a lot about well-being and you know, the importance. Trust is more important than ever now, isn't it? You know, and empowering our staff and you know, to work from home and be as productive as we need them to be. So in your organisation, what challenges have you faced in managing teams virtually? And how have you effectively monitored and measured the quality and quantity of work done by staff working from home?
Hi, thanks a lot, first of all, to INM for having me, and it's wonderful to be with all of you. Yes, I think I loved the previous topics of how we got here, the moping, the shock, and then some of us are still in shock because it keeps on coming. So I like the fact of trust is because I think it put us all in a place where the management or HR had to absolutely trust people. So in March, we went to a total lockdown in Sri Lanka for about 3 to 4 weeks or more than that. And we being a technology organization, so we are one of the premier service providers in Sri Lanka. We are a telecommunication service provider. We are a COD business, so we have fixed TV, mobile. So we had the benefit because we started our digitization and simplification journey somewhere in 2017. So we could say that we were pretty much ready few years back. So the challenge was from next day onwards, everyone moved into Microsoft Teams platform. They started working, and our challenge was not only getting our people to work. Our challenge was also how do we, I'm in the enterprise business, how do we get our organizations, our large enterprise, our small and medium enterprise, how do we help them to function? How do we help the country to function? So one of the challenges was that everyone got into it to make sure that everyone else was okay. In the process, we had our support functions, health and safety, HR, to make sure that our teams were okay. And then, of course, we had the service culture transformation team, making sure that the momentum and the empowerment and the appreciation of people on their way home, going down to lockdown areas, making sure that they are safe and the customers are safe. So one of the things is we created, we jumped in our number one value is service from the heart. So I think it was a clear demonstration of service from the heart. Everyone jumped into the bandwagon. Then everyone kicked in from support functions to enable the frontline team, the field team, the sales team, to make sure that the customers had connectivity. One of the things that we did was, since we moved into different platforms, we started monitoring our performance in Jira, Confluence, different platforms that helps us. And we were already in a mode of where we do stand-ups and where we check our performance on a monthly and have steer calls on a weekly basis. So where check and balance the results, and then as well as the results show in end of a sprint, and of course there's an adoption team that picks up. So I think in that process, apart from the BAU, the back office teams had a very transparent way of working things. So we knew what are the areas that people needed support, break down barriers and work. And the first few months was like, We worked long hours, and we made sure that we helped to deliver for the organization to make sure that our vision is enriching Sri Lankan lives and enterprises, so whether it's retail or whether it's enterprise customers. So I think one of the fundamental was the tools enabled us to track us where we were. We also brought in empowerment. We also brought in taking care of your internal customers as well as external customers. So I think one is being ready for an unknown challenge as an organization during good times absolutely helped you to move over fast in tough times. So I think that those are the key takeaways I would say that we handled and faced.
Okay, great. And generally, have you seen an increase in productivity in this period, or?
Yes, I think that's a very good question. Within the first 4 weeks, we put up products that we have done in the last 2 quarters. We've put more products out. We've done more adoption than that. Our digital adoption in our enterprise platform increased in 30%, because I think COVID absolutely enabled you to do that, but also the teams made sure that make it a platform for us to get there. So actually, I think we achieved our targets very well as an organization, having a challenge of having COVID in the market as well. And we improved our NPS by 25 percentage points as well. So I think in that sense, we managed to achieve targets, and we saw productivity and more faster to market as well.
Yeah, fantastic, fantastic. Well done on that. Okay, thank you, Riga. I'll move over to Dr. Jarmo now, and just linking in, following on from that conversation around productivity. Another topic linking in the conversation we've had around work-life balance and whether people's workload is sustainable. What has changed in how we are now empowering staff and allowing them space to develop? How has the way we work changed, and how does that empowerment look in the future?
Thank you. First of all, apologies, something bizarre happened to my camera, so I'm sorry if it looks like I'm speaking from the shadow. Yeah.
It's okay.
This is not within my abilities to fix right now, so we'll have to live with it, I guess. Obviously, an excellent question, and I sort of hear one of the favorite phrases of my late father echo in my ears, which is never jump to conclusions. And why do I say that? Because I think the reality is we are at a point now where for many businesses, technology adoption at various levels, in various ways, has given a lifeline, has ensured survival, has provided a degree of continuity. But the reality is we have reconfigured the workplace. We are in the process of reconfiguring the labor markets more generally, a process which I think in many ways could be particularly transformative in the Gulf region. But the reality is we don't know what all of this will look like once the dust has settled, if it ever settles. Obviously, it'll be an ongoing process. So I think we're in a discovery phase. We're on a learning journey, which should be recognized as such by everybody. And I think part of being an effective leader in this environment is taking that bull by the horns. Now, on the issue of well-being, I do think that the flexibility that technology has introduced to work life is something that will, in fact, in the foreseeable future, be potentially quite good for the well-being of employees, because they will, among other things, in many cases, be in a position to strike a better balance between home and work. They will, in many cases, spend far less time in traffic, getting irritated every morning, etc. I think this is also potentially really quite important for the health and well-being of businesses, because the reality is, even as this pandemic will subside, the recovery phase will not be straightforward. It will be full of challenges, and many companies will have to go through I suspect, a lengthy process of ongoing adaptation. So giving companies more flexibility with respect to their labor force is also, I think, an important element of making it work. I do think the flexibility genie is now sort of permanently out of the bottle, and what we probably are going to see is a movement towards a new deal, a new kind of employment contract, which is no longer strictly about 9 to 5, come to the office, work out, put in the hours, etc., report to your manager, but something much more flexible, quite potentially on different terms than before. I think still remains to be seen whether this will mark the triumph, if you like, of the gig economy, so people will have multiple irons in the fire as they strike this new deal with their employers. For instance, what is interesting in the Gulf context is I think this could be a significant game changer, in the sense that if companies are ready, as I think many of them are, to accept this idea that people can work primarily from home, then especially for women in the Gulf region, this could be a new beginning. And the reason I say that is female economic participation historically has been much lower than male participation, whereas female educational attainment has consistently been much higher. So if we can get to a situation where Gulf women can strike a different balance, okay, between their cultural obligations, family responsibilities, and their careers, then this could, with time, emerge as a new force in the regional economy, and in fact create better companies and create better labor markets that will, among other things, help these economies begin to wean themselves off of this long-standing dependency on low-cost labor, which quite frankly has held back the modernization and development of much of the private sector.
Yeah, I agree. Thanks, Dr. Jarmo. Thank you. And I do think we've been forced into, the new norm, which we're all used to having conversations about that now. But, the need to be in the office, to be productive, and it does free up certain groups like women. When you note around, activities in the Gulf, it gives more flexibilities around work. So that's really insightful. Thank you. Okay, so Anand, I'd just like to ask you, what do you feel all this change means for business? So how do you feel one would build trust and engagement with new customers in this virtual world within the confines of a laptop screen?
I think one of the interesting things is what the pandemic has shown, what 2020 has shown, is that both for individuals and for enterprises, it's been and it continues to be a journey of discovery. And that journey has brought with it a lot of changes. Now, we must remember, many organizations and many people working in many organizations, especially if they had been procedure bound, have forgotten what it is to discover, have forgotten almost what it means to change. So to a lot of people, now I engage a lot with startups, and startups are all about change. So, this is not apparent to me, but when I engage with companies which are more traditional, been around for a long time, I find that they are finding difficulty. They're still in the coping piece, because they are finding the process of change to be anxiety ridden. They've become very anxious, and they're still in the process of discovering what this change really means to them all. Now, and then I think about it, I realize what will happen at the end of this transformation. Let's say there is the vaccination has come, or a cure has also been found, and so on and so forth. Three things can happen. One, certain things that are being done today post the coping and somewhat in the scoping stage will stop, and people will revert back to type. Organizations will revert back to type, how things were done before. Or they may say that, listen, this has really given us a new way of doing things, and therefore the new practices will endure, right? In some instances, practices that have been brought to bear to manage the current situation, those practices will evaporate. The question is for each organization to figure out in each of these three buckets, what needs to go into the revert bucket, what needs to go into the evaporate bucket, and what needs to go into the endure bucket. Organizations which have discovered the merit of change and actually have defined for themselves a good view of the transformed world, and make no mistake, the world will be very different, than what it's been so far. They will have the endure bucket, large, full, bubbly, and enriching. Organizations that are still fearful, it's not their fault, it's just that fearful and really still caught up in the practices of the past, will probably find their revert bucket to be quite full. And I think individuals will be obviously slightly different, and therefore you're probably going to see a lot of, especially amidst younger people, a lot of movement of people from more traditional organizations to newer organizations. And this is where the word trust, which you used earlier, is going to make a big difference. Organizations need to express themselves, and then demonstrate what trust really means. And that translates itself into something for the customer side as well. Organizations need to understand what does it mean to build relationship with customers when they are engaging with customers remotely. And that's happened, A good example of this is Tata Consulting, which is the second or third largest IT service company in the world. They have made an announcement. All these companies have all their employees working from home till now, the last 7, 8, 9 months. They have announced that people can have the choice of working from home till, I think, June end. And even after that, they have announced that up to 25% of their staff only will be coming to offices to work. Obviously, they will rotate it and do some stuff. I don't know how they're going to do it, but 75% of their existing, that changes everything. The office space changes, the way they engage changes. Now, TCS is a slightly easy example to take because their engagement with their customers had a big chunk of it already over, telephone and screen and so on and so forth. But then look at somebody like an accounting firm. I have been on the board of a publicly held company whose entire accounting review, audit, and every process got completed remotely, of a publicly held company. They have published the results on time, right? How did they suddenly change? And about the last set of people you would expect to change so quickly would be accountants, because they're used to a certain way of doing this for decades, maybe hundreds of years on end. And they changed overnight. So to me, and they discovered a newer way of dealing with their customers. So all I'm saying is, if there is preparedness to change and this endure bucket is large, I think you will find those enterprises will find it easier to make their engagements with customers enriching as well. Obviously, there is lots more details to this. Digital engagement is quite different from physical engagement, but subject to all of that, that's the mechanics of it. The philosophy of it has to be accepted first. Mechanics will follow easily.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think it's kind of looking at the endure bucket. A lot of things that previously people will have said, well, no, that's impossible. We can't possibly work from home or do that outside of an office. And you've been forced into that change, and we can work from home. We can do this online. So it's a really, really interesting topic, I think. And that links us into Karina and looking at the virtual learning piece as well. So looking at how do we develop future talent and encourage proactive behaviour and virtual learning, and how do you think leaders can nurture, grow and develop their team members to create leaders of the future?
Thank you. Yes, from a learning and development perspective, I think the one thing that we always struggle with, and that's the number one prize, is to get a company to be a learning organization, where learning comes naturally for people and where people naturally coach and mentor each other and teach each other. And there's social learning that takes place. So I think that's the first thing, because that goes into the proactive people wanting to learn. And then the other big thing is, and I think it's a basic thing of human nature, is what's in it for me? So if a person doesn't understand what's in it for him, he will not go and do that learning. And that's the kind of conversation that you need to have with your people. If there's something that you want them to learn that maybe they don't want to, they need to understand the why. Why do I need to do this? And ultimately, how does that link to me? How is that going to touch me? And it's not just a thing, go and do this and learn this because you have to be going this way as a company. So from a learning perspective, I think that's very important. The involvement of the leader in learning, that's also something that we're struggling with a lot. And I understand leaders are extremely busy. You have lots of business objectives that you need to achieve, etc. But your involvement in the development of your employees are crucial. Because unless a person buys into the learning and says, or selected the learning and says, I want to do this for whatever reason, you have to follow their progress. You have to work with them and get them and have these kind of conversations with them, and also create opportunities for them to go and practice and embed the learning, because just to do learning and walk away is not good enough. They have to practice and embed. And unfortunately, or fortunately, you as a learner is the crucial person that needs to help them with that and create those opportunities. From a future learner perspective, I think for me, and it's very, again, I'm talking about getting back to basics, is if you want somebody to empower somebody to be a learner, you first of all need to show that behavior. You need to be the example, because that's the best way people learn. I can remember one of my managers that I said, I want to be a manager like she is. And so, and I've always remembered the way that she managed us, and I actually started implementing a lot of what she did. So that's the first thing, is you have to live the right way of a leader, because that's the best way that they're going to learn. If you're looking for what kind of leader you need to be, I just off my head in terms of what I know, go and have a look at something like the servant leadership style. If you look at it, it's got a lot to do about listening to your people, having empathy, etc. Another one that I love is the 5 levels of leadership from John Maxwell. What's interesting there, he talks about, are you a leader because of your position, because that's why people follow you? Or ultimately, do people follow you because of who you are and how you empower them through their life with you? And that's why people will follow you. So you'll see there's really this thing of getting to a place where we really empower our people in such a way that they can even become better than us. And that's okay, because that's when they really buy into you. And then ultimately, I think it comes through all the whole morning so far is trust. Do you trust your people? What do you need to put in place to trust them? I know there are some people from a personality perspective that needs to be in control. For whom it's very difficult. But find the ways to build trust between you and them, to put in stuff that you can trust them. And then also that they can trust you, that they feel that you have their back. So for me, all of that together, you will live an example of leadership that ultimately your people will learn from you. And that's the best learning. There's wonderful programs out there, but that's the best learning for anybody, for a future learner. Thank you.
Thanks, Karina. A really big focus on trust and empowerment. I think that links in perfectly with more of the, you know, the coaching and mentoring leadership style that we're all embracing now. Thanks for that. I've definitely got some books to read as well on your recommendations. So thanks, Karina. I'll go over to Reka now. And talking about coaching and mentoring, how do you use coaching and mentoring at Dialogue to build future talent? And what would you say the impact is, and how has it helped employees and your business in these uncertain times?
Yeah, I think coaching and mentoring is a very good tool. Now more than ever is because we are more distant and not personally meeting each other or doing trainings. But let me just piggyback on what Karina said, is about driving the purpose why I need to do it. So even before coming to coaching and mentoring, what we do is, I think, like she said, salespeople specifically, I mean the enterprise business, their job is to drive the business objectives, bring in the sales, bring in the bacon, right? So the last thing that they want to do is training. But one of the feedback that we constantly got from our employee engagement is, where do we go from here? What is our growth? Now, we are a very fast-growing organization, and we're a very agile organization. So we have new roles coming up. So if you had, in a large enterprise, if you had sectors like basic diversified manufacturing, FMCG, different sector managers or sales managers, we are focusing the next 3 years on ICT sector. Bringing in all the IoT solutions, improving the ICT revenue rather than the traditional revenue, which means already all of a sudden when we are doing our business planning, there's about 7-8 new sectors that have brought in, which means there is absolute career progression. So what we did was, we went in our town halls and we went one-on-one, and we said, there are 2 things why we are doing your development. Your development is for you to perform as your job today. So we did a very customized gap analysis, and we moved in from traditional just training everyone on everything into personalized learning journeys, and broke it into sprints, a smaller bite size, and at the end celebrating their achievement. Then we moved in to tell them the bigger picture. Okay, apart from you performing in your job in your optimized level, we are also growing you to the jobs that are available horizontally, vertically, and also totally new job roles. So now they see a bigger purpose. I'm not learning today only for this, I'm also learning for the future roles, my future of the organization that I can get into, because we as an organization, apart from sales, have a lot of subsidiaries as well. Apart from that, what we did was we broke in the coaching to see who needs coaching, and then we would have to see who needed extra support, have those conversations, and ask what is the challenges you have. So we broke into small weekly stand-ups and did those coaching and mentoring. And also with the gap assessment, we just did not put everyone through learning. If we had mature people with better knowledge on functional or people management, then we pull out them and then we focus on who is needed. So I think in that sense, last year specifically, I think a lot of people say that your training budget is what gets cut off during difficult times, but I think as an organization, we spent a lot of training and grooming, but what we did was we infused it. It's like proper medicine for the proper sickness, not for, not a single vaccine for everyone. The other end was that where you learn and you also see a future path to it. So that was the most important thing. And of course, growing from last year to mid this year, our management team is also going through a development program from a group which is Axiata, our parent companies in Malaysia, where they're developing more than 150 leaders across all the 9 operating companies. And currently they're going through a program as well. So it's functional, it's behavioral, it's leadership. So we infuse top down and we infuse operationally. And that's how we drive the importance of learning.
Fantastic, fantastic. Thank you, Rika. I'd just like to really, I'll move over to Dr. Jarmo quickly, and I've got one last question here. I could ask so many more. In many cases, businesses have succeeded in turning the challenge of COVID-19 into an opportunity to increase innovation, creativity and productivity. What do you think are the biggest risks and biggest rewards?
Okay, let me start with the risks, since you mentioned those first. I think risk number one is what I call the sticky syrup of culture, which is particularly sticky, I think, in a part of the world where people are used to ongoing population growth, increases in government spending, etc., all the arrows pointing up, whether that's true or not. So the risk is that once the curtain falls on COVID-19, people will just revert to their pre-crisis behavior. They think it's back to business as usual. I think potentially an even bigger risk is what I call my risk number two, the assumption that somehow these short-term technological solutions are a magic bullet, that these are the answer, that these are the corporate equivalent of the COVID-19 vaccines. And what we end up with is essentially discontinuous change. And we see a loss of momentum. Behavior becomes reactive rather than strategic. And I suspect a lot of this applies far beyond the Gulf. But I think it's the opportunities that are really interesting. Clearly, it is important for people, in spite of what's happened over the past year or so, to recognize that technology is not the solution. It is part of the solution. It is potentially a precondition for more enduring change. And there is an opportunity then to sort of think on an ongoing basis, okay, how do we best make this new constellation, this new configuration work? How do we unleash its full potential? And perhaps more fundamentally, how do we transition from a relatively static culture to a culture that accepts the idea of ongoing change? Now, I'll do the unfashionable thing here and refer to the old Russian revolutionary Lev Trotsky, who spoke about a permanent revolution. But I think this is what corporations in today's world face. They face ongoing change, whether it's unanticipated or anticipated change. And there needs to be this inbuilt ability to adapt and think ahead, think harder about risk and opportunity in a more proactive fashion. I think what's encouraging about the changes in the Gulf corporate sector is that at the very least now companies are asking questions. And this is how change begins. How do we accelerate this change? How do we make it more universal? I think there is an opportunity within organizations, but also beyond organizations, to encourage what I would call comparison shopping. While some of these solutions that we've seen are global solutions or are very widespread, at the end of the day, it's individual companies, individual organizations tackling them in their own ways. And I think there's a lot of value potentially to be unleashed by sharing some of these experiences, you know, getting a better understanding of what works, what doesn't work, and sort of embracing this idea of dynamism, ongoing dynamism in the new post-COVID-19 business culture. So kind of in the spirit of Winston Churchill, never let a good crisis go to waste.
Yeah, very true, fantastic, thank you. Okay, we're moving towards the end of the session now, and I just wanted to give you all the opportunity to sum something up and give your opinion, really. So in one sentence, which one leadership capability is most needed to help companies thrive post COVID-19? And what does impactful leadership mean to you? And it has got to be a very, you know, concise and short sentence, because we're over time. So I'll start with Anand, please.
I think impactful leadership means demonstration of empathy, acceptance of change, and leading people by demonstrating that option visibly.
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you. Karina? Karina, do you have any thoughts on that question? Or Rika?
So I think leaders have to create the path and lead the way during uncertainty. You have to be agile, you have to support the change, and I think most of all, be with the people and lead the change. So I think a leader should give direction during uncertain times, and then you can succeed.
Perfect. Thank you. And Dr. Jarmo?
3 words come to mind: listen, learn, and think, and demonstrate that that's what you are doing. Because we are navigating uncharted waters here.
Absolutely. I love that. Thank you. Karina, anything to add?
Vulnerability, and that means if you talk to your people and you don't have the answers, tell them you don't have the answers, tell them you're scared, but we're going to get through it, we're going to do it. And if you don't, and very importantly, there's Brené Brown, she has a book there, To Lead, that will explain or give you all the detail you need to know around the vulnerability. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you. Well, actually, we haven't had a lot of questions come through. So what I will say is if any of the attendees on the webinar do think of any questions, feel free to contact me directly and I can reach out to today's panelists. Thank you, Dr. Jarmo, Karina, Anand and Rika for your time today. It's been a really enjoyable session and I really appreciate you coming on to today's session and sharing your expertise. So it's been really insightful. Thanks so much. And thank you to everyone else for joining us today for this Insightful Leadership webinar. We will be sending out a video of this webinar following on from now, so you can revisit it. Take care, stay safe, everyone, and I really hope that our paths cross again in future. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All the best. Take care.
Take care. All right. Bye-bye.